My name is Minister Johnny Banks Sr. I'm the Executive Director of A Knock at Midnight. Knock at Midnight is located at 400 West 76th Street in Suite 206. Again, it's always good to be on the show. Really great to be back. Phil Bradley couldn't make it here this evening, but we're going to continue in the same vein as we did last week. But before I go any further, let me just talk a little bit about what A Knock at Midnight is doing. Currently, we are working on several projects with youth for the summer around youth employment, but we really have the opportunity to get those young people some great work experiences, working at Walgreens, working at Marshall's, some of the community daycare centers where we've located them in businesses where they can really pick up some skills. As a matter of fact, we also have them working at a couple of community-based auto body shops, one of them being Max's Auto, where the young people are really learning and picking up some valuable skills and some valuable experiences that as their life begins to pivot, they can piggyback on those skills and use those skills again down the road. Our younger children, the 10 to 13-year-olds, we're doing a lot of disorienting experiences, taking them to a lot of places, introducing them to things in the city, not just fun activities, but cultural experiences, providing effective parenting and family advocacy services 3 days a week. Parents they're getting parenting training. They're getting counseling. A lot of the stuff that's going on in our community. Our people and the people, especially the people we service, they don't get counseling. It's strange, but it's true. African Americans are not, or some African Americans. I can't make that say all African Americans, but many African Americans does not see counseling sessions or talking to someone about what's going on with them as a precursor to help solve some of their problems. So we offer family, individual, as well as small group counseling for those people who need them. Some substance abuse support services for those people who are struggling with marijuana or other types of drugs, alcohol or alcoholism, and they need to be worked with to try to dispel, dissipate, cut back, reduce the harm, however you want to say it, to get to a level where they can be abstinence from any mood and mind altering substance. So that's some of the work we're doing as we continue to recruit. We continue to beat the streets, looking for young people who want to get back in school. We never stop around organizing for young people to go back that have dropped out of school to get back in school and work to complete their education. The Chicago Public Schools has blessed us to actually work at one of the summer parks this year to do safe passage over at O'Halloran Park on 83rd and Wood. So our staff is out providing safe and secure activities or functions so that our children can be free to do what they need to do, whether it's playing in basketball tournaments or just simply getting on a swing under the watchful eye of our staff. So we got a lot going on. I'll continue to talk about that, but I wanted to really get into tonight's topic. We're going to have 8 weeks where we're going to talk about the 8 steps of nonviolence. So each week we're going to come in and we're going to take one of those steps. We're going to dissect one of those steps. We're going to try to give the viewing audience a really in-depth understanding, because when we talk about nonviolence, how do you deal with it? How do you work with it so that it works for you? And subsequently, I've had the great blessing to actually work with people who really understand nonviolence, who can go much deeper than the social aspects, who can go much deeper than the civil disobedience and the things that we see a lot now, but really get into teaching. How do you make this happen? What are the steps? And once you understand the nuances, understand the steps that you need to take, and then you can start working toward dealing with violence from a totally different perspective. And so there's 8 steps. Those steps are observation, investigation, purification, negotiation, education, demonstration, confrontation, and then last but not least, reconciliation. So there's 8 different processes of dealing with how do you work with nonviolence. And lastly, but not least, is how do you work to make sure that people who are struggling with issues of violence can really work towards bettering themselves and doing some of the things that they need to do. Yeah. So here we have, just wanted to put on our overhead, the step that we're going to be working on tonight, dealing with nonviolence. I'm trying to get it straight for you. Our first step will be observation. As you guys can see, Phil popped in, so he's going to came in right at time where we can start talking about the first actual step of nonviolence. And I was just kind of giving them an overview of these 8 steps, why they are so important, and that we will be breaking them down over the course of the next few weeks and work with each step, so people really get an understanding that we're just not just. I know we're just having a discussion, but people need to get a more meat on this bone, so to speak. So when we're talking about, especially step 1, and we'll get into that right now, and we'll start talking about. And I just went through the 8 steps. So if you want to elaborate a little bit before we start in this one, please feel free to do so.
No, and thank you, Pastor Banks, for even having this conversation. We live in some perilous times, as you know, and part of what is not allowing crime to be addressed is that we have no witnesses. We have a no snitch clause. We have these variables, and nonviolence require us. The first step is that you make an observation. So, and let's talk about that. See, problem solving requires that you need an actionable process of observing something carefully enough that you can know what the problem is. Because if you don't know the problem, you can't come up with a solution. And part of our training inadvertently around violence, we've been trained to be violent. Part of violence is don't say you saw it. That's part of being a victim. Don't tell. Don't participate in the problem solving. Well, nonviolence says you gotta say you saw it. Step 1. But it's not that you just saw it, that you have to make an accurate account of what you saw. Of what you saw.
Absolutely.
What did you see? And you can't look at it through anger, hatred, fear, because it distorts what you see. And so that's why the nonviolent process is so important, because it's a process. It's a scientific method. See, violence by its very nature takes science out. It puts all kind of emotions, injuries. But in order to solve the problem, you have to look at it from a scientific method. The first step, like Pastor says, is observation. What did you see? But if you have been trained not to see, it's like, do you know what violence is? Do you know it when you see it? That's part of the problem.
Absolutely.
What if you don't know what it looked like? What if you think violence is so normal you don't even make an observation that it's violence? You just think it's a normal behavior in many respects, or we actually train ourselves not to see because you have to take responsibility for things you do see. And so that's the other downside to the whole thing of violence, that it trained people not to make observations.
Right. And one of the things that if we use a historical marker, one of the things that comes from the African American culture and our history is that due to our oppression and the devastation of being in slavery and being on plantations and living during that time, we were taught systematically and beaten to not look at people.
Right. Sure.
You know what I'm saying? We just were taught you were beaten to not look at whites. To not look at people.
To look at the mistake. To look at the error.
And subsequently,
to look at the behavior.
African American parents picked this up as a method to keep their child from getting killed. So they would then make their children not look people in the eye.
Sure.
So subsequently, we have a history of not seeing things the way they really are. You know what I'm saying? And now we've gotten to this violence issue, and we're still not looking at things and telling what we really see because we've been kind of trained. And it's time to break that cycle. And that's why we're talking about this. And that's why this first step is so important, because we have to break the cycle and understand the science of telling the truth about what you just saw.
And what you described was a thing called plantation parenting.
Absolutely.
We took the same methodology of how you beat someone so they don't get punched for doing something and use the same beating method in a family dynamic.
Absolutely.
And all you could reduce at that thing is people afraid of being caught, or produce slaves because it don't produce scientific minds.
And if we use the axiom, they did that so the child wouldn't get killed. Now you don't tell what you saw out of fear that you will get killed.
Right.
It's the same
Sure.
stuff.
Right.
Different time, different era. That's self-imposed now. And we really got to take a look at that.
Right. And one of the things that violence also does, it reverses the realities of things. Like they say, snitches get stitches. That's the premise of violence. But the reality is, because we're not snitching, we're getting a bunch of stitches. See, that's the thing. There's a whole bunch of stitches going around because there's no one telling on how to fight crime. So it has a reverse effect.
Right.
In fact, it actually locks you into the violence versus protect you from the violence. But the other thing about the no snitch clause, there's no snitch clause only really pertain to criminal behavior. But if one of us is doing right, one of us is responsible to say who's doing wrong.
Absolutely.
The problem is all the right citizens is doing wrong because they won't say what they saw.
Right.
And so like Dr. King so eloquently said, the problem is not the children of darkness, it's the apathy of the children of light. Those who say they are the enlightened ones. What do you see?
Again, good. And listen, my name is Minister Johnny Banks. We have Philip Bradley here from NonViolence Works. We're talking about violence prevention. How do you really work through this whole issue? What nuances and things that you can learn? We're happy to come out to your church, to your organization, to your school. We can do some professional development work. We can just come and work with your students. We can work with your congregations because we really got to get this where people really understand it.
Sure.
It's not just an accident that. And I'll give you a good example. LaShawn Ford and Reverend Anthony Williams are working on this whole thing where violence is dealt with as a mental health issue.
That's correct.
Well, we saw it in action the other day where they just charged some teenagers with felonies for acting out this mental illness called violence on a young lady who was disabled. She was not able to defend herself, and they jumped on her and they beat her, and they were able to solve that issue, but they can't solve a murder.
Right, sure.
If that make any sense. It makes no sense to me that we could use a lot of time to charge children with felonies for being victimized by this state of mental illness. When the young people needed some help, they need services.
They need the services. They need
don't
mental health
need
services,
backgrounds. They don't need felonies,
right.
Even though what they did was wrong. It's not defending wrong, but it's understanding what permeates and makes this happen.
Right. You can't punish your way into things. You have to scientifically solve the problem.
Right.
And that's what nonviolence brings. It brings a scientific method. It brings 8 steps. If you was making a cake, you need to follow the steps. If you don't follow the steps, you won't get the same outcome.
Right.
Well, everything requires steps. The good thing about the nonviolent process is that it's a process. Most people are not aware that it even exists.
Absolutely.
And if you can't do something that you're not aware of. But in order to also make an observation of violence, you have to use some parameters to define it.
Absolutely.
So you know what you're looking at. Now, let's use one view of violence. Let's use a theological understanding of violence. Violence is when you are unaware or disregard that you or another is a child of God. That's the first act of violence. That either you don't know that you have value or you don't value another person. That's violence. That is based.
It's a theological interpretation.
That's the
I want everybody to understand that this is we give an interpretation based on science.
So now the thing is, have you ever observed people who are unaware or who was aware and disregarded that you or another was a child of God? Well, that's an act of violence.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen that before?
And you have to tell the truth about this visual experience.
Right.
That's part of the issue we have. Nobody will tell the truth about they have saw another human being violated by another human being that knew or didn't know that what their actions were appropriate or inappropriate. Something's wrong with this picture.
Right. So when you see children violating, parents violating their children, you say, is the parent aware or are they unaware or disregard that they and their child is a child of God?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you see that? What did you just see? When people violate you, are they aware that they're a child of God, or they're aware and just totally disregarded that?
Yeah.
What did you see? And that's the first act of violence, to be unaware or to be aware and disregard.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
That's violence. And so now, so let's use the mathematics of violence. Violence is when you have a concealed truth and a promoted lie in every situation, not from time to time. Every time an act of violence happened, you could trace two things: what truth is not being told and what lie was being promoted.
Absolutely.
In every violent act, I don't care if it's child abuse, rape, incest, a mass murder, a public murder, the police killing a citizen, what truth is not being told and what lie is being promoted. In every situation.
In every situation.
If you try and enslave the Indians or enslave black folks, what lie is not being told, what truth not being told about these people, what lie is being promoted. If you want to kill 6 million Jews, what truth you not going to tell, what lie you going to promote. In every situation. If you're going to kill Africans in genocide, what truth you won't tell about what's decent, right above the border about these people would make them children of God. You ain't going to mention that. You're going to come up with falsehood, lies, slander to breed anger, to act like they have no value.
Take their lives, take their valuables, take their land, whatever it is that you want to extract from them.
When a child is shooting up a school, there's a truth not being told and a lie being promoted for that action to happen in every situation. So, have you ever observed that?
Right.
See, without knowing the parameters of what violence is and how to define it, it don't help you focus the tools necessary to make an observation. See?
And the framework or the blueprint of what you're trying to get done and not getting done becomes very flawed.
Right.
You know, and it doesn't make sense to anybody.
Right. Because what if you don't see other people yourself as a child of God, and you see and abuse is going on? You say, well, they just got that coming. Or you don't even see it as a violation. You don't see the value in these people.
Right. I want to put this definition up right quick because I want people to look at it. I really want people to understand what we are talking about. Observation, the action, the science, or the process of observing something or someone carefully in order to just get some information.
Right.
You know, you can't charge a person with something or say they this or that if you don't observe it.
Right, you have to observe
and you have to tell the truth about what you're looking at.
Right.
And most of us won't
We
do
won't
that.
do that.
Then it goes a little further. It says the ability to notice things, especially significant details of what you're looking at.
Right, sure.
Most of us don't even get into the details
sure.
of what we're looking at, so we're not real observant.
That's
because
correct.
observant people see stuff that nobody else really paid attention to. It's like putting a dot on a white sheet of paper and everybody notices the dot and not the sheet of paper.
That's correct.
The detail is not the dot, it's the sheet of paper.
Right, that's right.
You know, and so we go and we deal with that. And lastly but not least, a remark, statement, or comment based on something one has seen, heard, or noticed. Will you tell the truth about what you see, what you heard, and things that you noticed?
Right.
How can you say that you didn't notice that your neighborhood was declining?
Right.
That everybody was moving. I mean, Inglewood didn't get vacant overnight.
No,
and people slowly left.
That's correct.
And everybody looked and said, I wish that was me.
Right, sure.
Not that the neighborhood was declining. Was it just only gentrification, or did violence implode that community?
That's right. I had the privilege of going to a concert out at Ravinia. And in order to get there, you have to take two trains, an inner city train and then a suburban train that get you to the actual location.
Okay.
On the inner city train, the signs say, don't look at nobody, don't talk to nobody, keep your hands to yourself, don't bother nobody.
Right.
That's the city train. Don't you bother nobody. Matter of fact, act like you didn't see nothing. Keep your eyes to yourself.
Right.
Keep your hands to yourself, and don't bring too much attention to yourself.
Absolutely.
Those are the rules of engagement on the train. You get off that train and get on the next train to go to the event, and it has a sign that says, "See something, say something." Now, as this train is pulling off, people are taking the shoes off, drinking wine coolers, playing music, and they are free to be because they are governed by, if I see something, I'm going to say something.
Absolutely. And everybody on the train
And everybody know
if you do something on this train,
somebody gonna see it and they gonna say something.
Right.
Okay, and it's the most peaceful, freedom-loving train you're gonna have going and coming, only because the rules of engagement is see something, say something. Now, even in our communities, do we see crime? When do we say something about it? Do we see the paper on the ground? When do we say something about it? Do we see the decay? And when do we say something about it? And you can't hold other people to something that you have to do.
Right.
That's
right.
the other thing about.
Absolutely. And one of the things before we run out of time is there are many facets to this solving this problem, right? And the people that's after the white community, because they say they got a problem, can't be mad with the people that say, no, we got to deal with the black people because they part of the problem.
Right, sure.
You cannot get angry because your segment of solving this problem differs from what somebody else believes.
Sure.
There are many facets to this. People are playing a part in this, and they can't be left out the equation. And some of it is a lack of education.
Sure.
Some of it is apathy. They just don't care.
Right.
Some of it is people outside of the system that's doing what they're doing. Listen, our time runs fast. We got 15 seconds. Listen, audience, we thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week at 7:30. We really appreciate you viewing. Remember that in the darkest hour, truth and knowledge is the way. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for watching. God bless you.